Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and with us today we have Marcus Holland. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Can you
Thank you very much.
tell the audience a little bit about sort of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so as you said, and rightly said, I'm Marcus. I guess I'm kind of in charge of the day-to-day running of E Type UK. I co-run it, and I guess kind of co-own it with my father, who's I guess meant to be enjoying kind of retirement. But I guess depending on which way you look at it, he's enjoying it in an alternative form through the guise of classic cars, but also being involved in the running of a business, which may not be the most enjoyable side of it. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Right. So how did this all begin? You said so. Did you? Let's wind back to sort of early days. Were you a car person from the beginning? Have cars around and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always kind of been interested in cars. You know, like any kid, I always had a fine collection of cars to play with whilst I was growing up, and always wanted more cars, and had kind of particular model cars which which came in kind of, I've forgotten who made them, but came in plastic boxes, and I would have those on the windowsill, kept in their plastic boxes, and kind of look at those and ogle at those, and every so often get them out. I know you could open the doors, you could open the boot, you could open the bonnet, and then kind of put them back in, but they were complete plastic, but they were my relative pride and joy from a young age. And so I'd always been kind of interested in cars, and Dad had always owned a couple of kind of sports cars whilst we were growing up, which is always, everyone wanted to sit in the front seat of those. And then outside of that, it had been kind of grandparents' cars. I remember kind of my first enjoyable experience was pretending I could drive a Mini, which my grandma owned, which used to be sat in the garage, and sitting in that and kind of pretending as if I was driving it. As one of the few cars which I could reach the pedals of from a kind of relatively young age. I could hold the pedals, sat on the edge of the seat, and or hold the steering wheel and just about clip the pedals from a distance. So that kind of I guess cars has always been around, but it hasn't necessarily been from a business perspective or from a career perspective, something that I've been involved with, and I guess I've kind of come to it relatively late, so to speak. And as has my father, it's never been something that he was involved with. He wasn't in the automotive sector or anything like that. It's very much been something which we've enjoyed from a distance, and we've enjoyed looking at, but we haven't been intimately involved with.
Yeah, and then what was the gap between you being 5 and E Type UK? What sort of happened in that gap?
A reasonable amount happened, I guess. My dad kind of had a career working up in London, and moved overseas a reasonable bit. And I kind of went to school, went to university, came out of university, got a job in London myself, working in advertising, and for a kind of variety of reasons, I guess, felt like it wasn't the right path for me. Wasn't particularly enjoying it. It wasn't something I was super passionate about. I couldn't seriously say I get up in the morning and be like, right, let's go and advertise some shampoo, and I can't wait to see the results. There was no kind of deep dying passion that got me out of bed every morning, and so it was relatively intense. It was quite cutthroat. It was long hours, and I had there was kind of some health things that came up, and essentially felt like it wasn't the right thing for me. It wasn't what I wanted to continue doing, and I was at an age where I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have kids, I didn't have any dependable. So it felt like, right, let's. If I'm going to change, now is the time to change. And I kind of approached my dad, or was talking to my dad kind of randomly. We used to meet up and go and play golf for our sins, and that was kind of just to get us in a really bad mood. Go and hack around a golf course. and play terribly and just do it, once every 6 months, pretending that we knew what we were doing when we turned up. And and it kind of, we were just talking about things. And I'd always followed classic cars. I'd always, I was a bit of a, I guess I was a bit of a Land Rover Defender kind of nut. I've owned Defenders for a long time. And I was kind of talking about, well, maybe doing something in the car industry would be a nice idea. My dad, funny enough, was looking at kind of buying an E-Type at the time, something which he remembers from childhood, something which he recalls and was retired essentially, and looking at a classic car. And I always kind of, well, E-Types were well out of my price range. Obviously knew of them, but could never afford them. And essentially, it was kind of one of those things where we started thinking about, well, maybe we'll do something in the classic car space. I had an interest initially. My ambition was to try and work on the cars, to try and kind of be able to learn them, be able to fix them, work on them. Basically do something which I think I would enjoy playing around with, and try and turn that into a business. And it just so happened that when we were looking at it, and my dad was interested in kind of getting involved in something, and had an interest in E-Types, it was kind of, we were looking around and basically just doing a bit of market research and inquired on a classic car business that was for sale. And the guy basically said, "Oh, well, what do you want to do?" And my dad said, "Well, we're kind of interested in E-Types, and but we're still relatively open-minded and just looking around." And he went, "Well, it's funny you say that, because the business I've got for sale is an E-Type business." And that's kind of, well, the rest is history. But I mean, we're going to go into the history, obviously. But that's kind of how we got to where we got to today. It started off with my dad kind of coming down, having a look around initially, just on the basis of, well, let's just go and have a look, see what's out there and see what it's like, and see, what is this business? What does it do? How does it run? And actually got down there, and he quite liked what he saw, liked the setup, liked the location, liked everything about it effectively, and things just started falling into place that made it a viable proposition for us, and something which we could move on and do. And I was relatively fortunate at the time. I was still working up in London. He was still retired, but I was relatively fortunate at the time that I was able to kind of agree with the company I was working with that I could make a move sooner than they would have liked, and fundamentally we were able to kind of step in and pick it up.
Interesting. As like, I guess, complete outsiders from that space, like coming in and looking at a business that works on cars and stuff, was that quite like, it must have been quite an interesting learning process of like how obviously this business operates, but also just like how all that fits together, what it looks like from the outside. How is this going to work? That must have been quite a challenging bit at the beginning, and also just trying to work out whether it makes sense and whatnot.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever watched The Apprentice, but one of the things that kind of generally comes up as you get into the latter stages of The Apprentice is Lord Sugar kind of saying, well, what do you know about X coming from Y? And never has that adage kind of rung more true than when you're going and buying a business which you know absolutely nothing about. So to speak, obviously you can do as much market research as you possibly want, and you can do as much talking to people as you can. But fundamentally, when it comes down to it, the talking eventually has to stop, and you have to go in and start running it. And the realities of running it are the talking and the research can never prepare you for it. Yeah. And the reality is extremely different, and certainly the automotive industry is a very mature, well-formed marketplace. And so, there are people, it's not as if it's only been around a decade, it's been around for forever. And there are people that have worked in it forever, and there are ways in which it operates which you have to get up to speed to relatively quickly. And so yeah, it was a challenge, and certainly we come from, as I said, we come from a background where we were working in, essentially service provision. We weren't dealing in goods manufacture,
Yeah.
and service provision as well. So yeah, it took a lot of getting up to speed. It took a lot of learning. It took a lot of kind of moments in dark rooms with cold towels, kind of going, what have we done? And I can't believe we made that mistake. And then you get some people who are well versed in the market who come in and go, "You didn't do that, did you?" Well, yeah, we thought it was a good idea at the time. And they're like, "Well, no, that's why no one else is doing it." And you kind of go, yeah, well, we've realised that now. Yeah, we've learned them. Where were you, 3 weeks ago when we were making the bad decision? And yeah,
Can you give me
those kind of things.
an example of like some of the things, early days of like, we thought this was how you did it, and actually we learned very quickly that you do not do that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the classic car industry, well, I guess and the car industry, so to speak, but certainly the classic car industry is diverse and has a whole range of marks and a whole range of opportunities within it. And I think one of the things that kind of comes in is you quite quickly come in and think, well, actually, one of the opportunities for us is, we're E Type UK effectively. So, we are a single model, single mark operator. And I think one of the things that you can kind of come in and feel like is, well, potentially there's an opportunity to, well, why can't you go and do Aston Martins? Why can't you go and do Ferraris? Why can't you go and do this? And it's one of those kind of things of, the simplistic view is, well, they've all got engines, they've all got four wheels, and they've all got seats, and that's the overly simplistic view. The reality is there's a lot of nuances that you've got to learn within those marks and within those models, and you've really got to get down to an intimate mark model knowledge before you can start operating those spaces. And people value that, and the customers don't view it as a single, as four wheels, an engine, a gearbox, and some seats. And so that was kind of one relatively quick learning. I think the other kind of relatively quick learning is actually, one of the key things about businesses, I guess, is trying to scale them up. And we came in and I remember having conversations about, we'd love to be we'd love to have kind of 20, 30 people. And actually, when you start recruiting to that level, it creates a very different beast to what we now want to run and what we are pushing towards. You start getting into this idea of you need a lot more work, firstly, and secondly is you start losing control of quality. You need a lot more space. You need to expand significantly, and actually that brings a whole raft of other challenges with it. And certainly those are things where we came in initially and were like, right, there's no reason why we can push into Aston Martin's being another brand, and there's no reason why we can recruit. We can have 30 people. And when we bought the business, we had 4 or 5, and so to get up to 30 was like, oh yeah, we're going to be going for it. It's going to be like, wow, we're going to have our own little city here. Of people and things, and we'll get Sainsbury's on board, and they'll build us a little Sainsbury's local and all the rest of it. It was ambitions of grandeur, and I think you quite quickly realise that maybe that's possible in the new car space. Maybe you can do that a lot more in the new car space because you're dealing with people's everyday vehicles, and they're not as concerned about actually their view of going to. They buy a VW, they go to VW. They may do that whilst they're under warranty and whilst they're under a service plan. But the second that they step out of that 3-year warranty, generally they're like, well, actually, the work that I can get done for £800 at VW, I can get done for £400 at another garage. And they're fine with that. And they don't mind that it's not a VW specialist. They're fine that it's working on a BMW, it's working on an Audi, it's working on a Skoda. They're fine with that. That doesn't apply in the classic car market. And there is precious little research into such a niche industry as the classic car market of how it operates. So you do come in looking at things going, well, this is how the automotive space works, as a very broad space.
Yeah, and then you go, okay, well, we could do a bunch of servicing on all sorts of vehicles whilst in the background doing some restorations and whatnot, etc. But then, yeah, I imagine as soon as you start to scale, you go, well, hang on, we need all of these cars to come to us. And actually, how big is how many E-types are there in the UK? Do you know? Or do you have a vague idea? Like on the road?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, they made about 70,000 across all three marques, and predominantly they were made for the US market. And so, yeah, I don't know how many remain on the road in the UK today, but certainly, the numbers are increasing, and generally they are kind of, the UK is a draw market for the E-Type.
So when did you start E-Type UK?
So effectively, we took over the running of it, from January 2016. So we kind of stepped in basically January 2016, and started running it from there. And there was no kind of handover period with the previous owner. It was just a case of, okay, here's the keys, and have fun. And
off
that
you
was
go.
kind of that was it. And then away we went.
Have you retained most of those original staff, or is that
so when we started? So when we started, the staff were critical. They came with the business. That was effectively really what we were buying. Was that kind of the staff, the knowledge? There was a degree of, okay, there was a reputation and there was a customer database, but customers will take a view on a new business under new ownership, and they can leave, but fundamentally the staff we bought across. Nowadays there aren't the staff that we took the business over with. They don't remain with us. So we have had a kind of full changeover of staff from those days, and that's for a variety of reasons, really. We've taken the business in a different direction, and also people have retired. One of the challenges in the classic car space is recruitment and is getting hold of people. And when we started, there was only 2 full-time members of staff. Effectively, the others were part-time. 4 days a week, 3 days a week, because their view. One chap was basically said, he's happy to hang around for 6 months, but he wants to retire before the winter comes. And that was kind of his ambition. And so it was like, he's like, look, I really want to help out, and want to see you guys succeed, but I also want to retire. And I think he was mid-60s, and fair enough. It's like he's waited, and he's happy to give us more of his time, and then he wants to go off and enjoy himself. And why not?
So has it gotten harder and harder over time to recruit people? Because as you said, it's having the in-depth knowledge of the cars, and to be a real specialist, you've got to have a lot of that, and that is a lot in the people. But do you have like a good sort of training set up for new people? And then also, how do you has that been tricky? Or
new people is, I think this is industry wide. I don't think this will be unique in any way to us at all. But I would say in the workshop side, we do try and run with an apprentice. We do try and kind of bring them through. One of the challenges is, we can't constantly have an apprentice. If an apprentice stays, effectively, we've got to rely on a bit of natural drop-off. The challenge is actually finding an apprentice. A lot of the kind of courses that exist within now, mechanical courses are focused on teaching potential people that want to join the industry modern cars and modern diagnostics techniques. And then in the body shop side, it's extremely difficult. And I would say the body shop side across the industry is the side that's most adversely affected. And yeah, we try and bring people through. The challenge for us is, you know, we don't have a big deep team where we can afford for, you know, we've got one metal worker, we've got someone that paints. You know, it's kind of like, if we are training and not working, then cars aren't getting done, and we've got to work for customers. And so, yeah, it's a big challenge. It's something whereby there are various schemes in the UK which are trying to kind of bring through those skill sets, but you know, nowadays you can't even, you know, a few years ago, you maybe could rely on taking somebody from a VW garage who had kind of become disillusioned with the, right, you've got to be this billable, you've got to do this, you've got to get through 20 jobs a day, this kind of thing, and they want to step into the classic car world, but they understand, because they have worked on and grew up working on carburetors and tuning engines and dealing with points. Now, as we evolve every year that goes by, those people, the people that come from modern dealership, they've never seen a carburetor. They don't know how to tune it. They are used to going, well, you know, where do I plug the ECU reader in? And so you're dealing with very different worlds. And in some ways that can be untrainable, because they are so used to a set way of dealing with things. And they've reached a level as well where financially they just can't afford to step away from going, okay, I'm happy to take a pay cut to effectively learn to then step back up. And so you end up in this kind of, you've got a whole multitude of problems that are working against you. And obviously most children nowadays, they want to be the next YouTube gamer, or they want to be they want to work in
crypto or whatever. Who knows?
That's it. They don't aspire to go, I want to work with my hands. I want to learn a skill. And that in and of itself creates a lack of appetite for people to necessarily join the industry. And then when they do form the appetite, they're at an age where they can't afford to take the hit financially to step in.
Yeah, it is. You always see, go to various places, and the bodywork. The bodywork stuff is always on, like metalwork specifically. You seeing what people do, take just like a flat sheet of whatever, aluminium or something, and then just like roll it all out and create this crazy complex shape that then eventually just like fits like pretty much exactly. You're like, how the fuck did you do that? Like, it's super impressive.
Insane. And it's like the skill set that exists within there is becoming rarer and rarer. And obviously, like a few years ago when you were working in restoration, like that was the only way to get hold of panels. You had to get the English wheel, you had to get a sheet bit of metal, get an English wheel, and effectively wheel out this sheet bit of metal and get it to the perfect shape. And now, with the explosion of classic cars and the interest within classic cars, is increasingly more and more of those, even those skill sets are passing or moving away within the classic car market, because people are pressing these panels now. There's a market that exists whereby these panels can be made at bulk, and you're never going to compete with, they're on the English wheel wheeling out. But when you see it, it is like, I mean, it's super impressive. And it's such an important part. I mean, on any classic car, but especially on an E-Type as a monocoque constructed chassis, is you have rust in the body. Well, there is no chassis per se. It's not like, okay, when you take the panel off, you're fine as long as the chassis is fine.
Yeah.
If the panel's rusty, it doesn't matter. And on an E-Type, if the panels are rusty, like you've got a problem. Like you need to, that's got to come off. And you're talking, major surgery there on the car. And that's expensive, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. From a restoration point of view, we'd kind of view it almost as 50-50, and for customers, 50% of what you're paying for is going on the bodywork, which at the end of it, you just see a nice painted shell.
Yeah,
you don't see this lovely engine, and you don't have your nice gearbox, and you don't have or new brake calipers and new wheels. You've just got a painted shell, and actually you've spent a lot of money just for somebody to put the paint on, which fundamentally probably, whilst looking better, doesn't look
it doesn't look drastically different. Yeah,
exactly.
And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but when we started taking away some of this filler, you should have seen the holes. They're like, yeah, I couldn't see the holes before.
That's
They weren't there.
yeah. Oh, we've had it before where like we've had customers whereby you blast the car and
Yeah.
they've come in and been like, "This isn't my car. Like, it can't be my car." And you're like, "This is it. Like this is it." Yeah, we had a chap bought a car from auction and it was like, I mean, it had 2 floors on it and it had filler. I mean, we've never seen filler on the floor, but
Oh,
somebody had like
nice.
filled the
Yeah.
floor of the car, and you kind of going, yeah, unfortunately, this is it. This is genuinely your car. I'm sorry to tell you, but yeah, it's certainly kind of interesting when you see them coming back, and increasingly they come back worse and worse. You know, there's now, you used to talk about like rust-free Californian examples. They've largely kind of disappeared now. Everyone's got
Yeah.
hold of the genuinely rust-free Californian examples, and even the ones that come from California now, you're kind of going, you, are you sure? Are you sure it was maybe New York?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Or it was in
New York and
California.
left us. Yeah.
And then Wales for 10 years.
That's it. Yeah. It was left outside in Wales in there after a brief fleeting trip via California.
Yeah. It's that sort of situation and doing body work and whatnot. Does that, have you seen the level, I'm trying to how I want to phrase this question, in terms of car prices and how E-types have changed over time, and different E-types are now worth lots more than other E-types, etc., etc., etc. Are people more willing to presumably spend more money on certain cars, and then have they all got to a point where it actually makes sense, or is just the labor cost of fixing stuff? How often does you just go, I mean, you can do it, but like, it's going to cost you way more than the car's worth?
Yeah, I don't. It's a difficult one. I mean, I once spoke to a restorer who kind of said, you know, unless you're spending a well-known restoration company, and he said unless you're spending kind of 300 grand on a restoration, like essentially probably don't bother doing it. Was kind of his view. And whilst I think that's maybe a bit drastic, to a degree, I think it may well be true. You know, it may well be a case of, you know, that is the truth, and certainly, you know, we don't charge anywhere near that kind of price for a full restoration, but it is a case of like I generally think that, you know, any car that you restore, my advice is generally to any person into a restoration is do it because you love the car. Like, your restoration is going to take a long time for a start, and if what you're hoping is, well, if I restore it today, by the time I finish the restoration, hopefully the market's moved with me and I've kind of got in at a price whereby I'm now even, is my view is, you know, restore a car, work on the basis that the bottom is going to absolutely fall out of the restoration market, and at the end of it you look at the car and go, oh, lovely car, and I'm happy to drive that into the sunset and use it for years and years to come.
Yeah.
And if you approach on that basis, then you're not disappointed. That said, we certainly have people who have bought and restored cars, and they have done extremely well because the market has evolved, and they were restoring cars at the cost of a restoration 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I generally think, though, that obviously I'm only intimately kind of knowledgeable on predominantly E-types from a restoration point of view. By talking, and we've got guys who have worked on restoring Ferraris, restoring Aston Martins. You know, we've got a big Ferrari contingent amongst our employees, and that kind of thing is actually, well, when you're into restoring Ferraris, the price of the car may be, or maybe, you know, in some instances a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
But actually, you can't get the part, so you're spending a lot more time making a bespoke part, which then you have to fit on the car. And fundamentally, at the end of it, is the car may only be worth what you put in to restore it. And that's just because the labor required to restore the car costs a lot more. But certainly the price of restoration has evolved along with the cost of the cars. And I generally think that, you know, restoration should be done, because you love it. And then hopefully at the end of it, you kind of go, Well,
That wasn't too bad.
that was a pleasant surprise. I've actually, I
Yeah.
made some money on it, and perfect. And I think either way, it's unlikely you're going to lose as much as you'll lose on your modern car when you drive it off the forecourt. It's people's perspective of a classic car against a modern car. A customer will turn up with a brand new Range Rover, and we'll
Yeah.
kind of go, oh, but I might lose 10% on this classic car. So we'll
You just lost 20.
your your Range Rover is it's a perspective thing, and so it's a tricky one. But I certainly think restoration is a big undertaking, and the cost has evolved, and I think the standard of restoration has evolved. I think everyone is restoring cars to a better level than what you could get last year, 2 years ago, 5 years
Yeah.
ago. I think that generally the restoration standard is evolving and moving, and people are restoring cars better, and the customer understands better what's involved in restoration and what's it done to a better standard.
Yeah. What does and what are the sort of some of the things that you would say, like if you say a car's been sort of restored better, or like now than maybe one that's done 10 years ago or something, just as a general, what sorts of things might be done, like let's say with you guys, that cars done now are probably done better than they were 15 years ago. What sort of things have evolved over that time? Like what's different? How could you distinguish between two cars?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the industry has moved a lot more. So it's kind of, I think that when you kind of get a car in from 15 years ago, as an example, we've got a few cars, we've had a few cars in, and it's like what somebody would do from a restoration point of view is they will take the loom that's currently in the car, and effectively they will, if it's lost its sheathing, they will just tape over electrical tape as the new sheathing for the loom. Well, now we would never do that, and a customer wouldn't accept that as a standard of restoration. Like, the kind of the cars built by cable ties, like everything's cable tied on. You wouldn't get away with that. Those are the very visual things that you kind of get involved with. We had it the other day where a customer bought in a car and said, "Oh, it's had a full restoration, 10 years ago, and it's had an engine rebuild." And we stuck a camera into the engine to have a look. It had a very leaky or a very kind of engine was throwing off a lot of smoke, and we stuck a camera into it and went, not so sure this has had what we would deem to be an engine rebuild.
Yeah.
And then he kind of sends a copy of the invoice in, and you look at it and you go, yeah, that's not what you would deem an engine rebuild today. It hasn't been rebored, it hasn't been relined, it doesn't have new pistons in it. And that's just what then you start getting into the internals, and a few 10 years ago or something, it may have been acceptable to reuse decent gear sets. Now traditionally everyone's kind of remaking gear sets and things, and so the standard is just evolving and moving forward, and just the options that are available now. You can, if you really want to, you can get magnesium cased parts and things. It's like the technology has existed whereby it's a lot more accessible for people to kind of go, okay, actually I want to I want something a bit more unique, I want something a bit more bespoke, and that's filtering down as these products become more readily available.
Yeah. That makes sense. Because I remember someone looking at this sort of stuff ages ago, and someone basically looking at what cars it made sense to restore and what not, and they were basically like, well, pretty much restoring any car with a little asterisk on it doesn't cost drastically different to restore. Like, pick car A and car B, any make, any manufacturer, they're not going to cost drastically different to restore, excluding, whatever, certain stuff. So, like, if you restore something that they made 100 bazillion of and no one wants, you're just going to spend whatever it is, 100 grand or something, and it's still going to be worth the 5 grand you paid for it, maybe 6. Like, there is a line of, there's just never, you're spending the money, and the cost price between the finished result and the start result might not even fluctuate that much, because you're like, well, that's a nice one and that's a rubbish one, but they're all 10k.
Yeah, absolutely.
In E types, so when I came to visit you guys, I
Yes.
genuinely had not a lot of knowledge of E-types. I knew that was like an E-type. I knew there was various types of E-types. Can we just run through the different versions and the main differences?
Yeah. So, I mean, the kind of headline versions are you've got essentially you've got three series. So you've got a series 1, a series 2, and a series 3. And the easiest way to tell any one from another is fundamentally the front end, the bonnet. So your series 1s have enclosed headlights. Your series 2s will have open headlights. And then your series 3s will also have open headlights, but then they will have a bigger, more pronounced grille. So effectively, you move from kind of a badge bar that runs across the center for a series 2 into a kind of a series of lined grills that exist. So that's predominantly the way to tell it. If I was telling everyone, you can tell from the back end as well. You can tell from the engine bay, and you can tell from trim as well. But fundamentally, when you're into a series 2, you can see that badge bar across the front, and then on the back end, you've kind of got a aluminium plate with the light cluster on it. Series 1s, those are slightly different, and series 2s and series 3s from a rear end aren't all that dissimilar. But predominantly, I would always say to somebody, look at the front. And then from the front, you can start telling what the car is. And series 1s, are traditionally and historically the most valuable cars. And then you've got series 3s, series 2s that kind of trade places. Depends who you talk to, would depend on who places values on which one above the other. But certainly, series 3s and series 2s are there or thereabouts on value.
And what's the most expensive is like series 1 manual?
Yeah,
something.
Series 1 manual lightweight E-Type, and those will go into the billions.
And that's like that's a race car, right?
Yeah, that's a lightweight E-Type that was made. They made 12 of them, and they are £6-7 million. Impossible to get hold of. And then and then kind of after that, you have the external bonnet lockers. So those have a kind of tear shape locking mechanism on the exterior of the bonnet down near the sill. And those, those depending on fixed heads are rarer, and then you've got rotors that aren't as rare. But you could easily trade hands on those £300,000-400,000 on those kind of cars, and then you move into the series 1s. The series 1s have kind of two derivatives. So you've got a 3.8 and a 4.2 essentially engine size. There are differences there that you can tell between the cars. So once again, there's slightly different trims. There's slightly different components that sit within the engine bay. But the fundamental difference is the size of the engine, and then you would look at the trim, and that's the easiest way to tell the difference. And those, those, you can tell those depending on spec you've got, depending on its provenance, depending on what the car is. You could sell those for 250,000. Without too much drama. But most will trade below that. But and then you're into series 2s, which you can get for around the £100,000 at the top end, maybe a little bit higher, and then series 3s you can probably push into the hundreds, into maybe the mid hundreds, 100, 150, 140 at the very top end for something like that. So that's a kind of rough steer on top end prices.
And what's the like cheapest, least desirable E-Type? Cheap. Let's just say cheapest, and then people like different stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I don't want to put anyone's car I think generally anyone's car down, but certainly, I think
probably an automatic,
absolutely, yeah, and that kind of I guess makes a degree of sense, because I would say to somebody, you know, automatic, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm completely sold on an automatic when I'm driving to and from work and I'm getting stuck in traffic and I'm doing 10 miles an hour and, you know, then going up to 20 and 30 and then having to go back down to stopping is like a manual is, yeah, okay, nightmare. So an automatic is great, but generally people buy their classic cars because they want to go out on an evening, they want to go out on the weekend, they want to go on a rally, they want to go on a tour. And so they want a manual, and so you know people aren't as they're happy to take the gear changing over their kind of modern cars. So certainly automatics, I would say, generally trade at a discount. And then what you're looking at is I guess the kind of longer wheelbase cars. Although Series 3s is a longer wheelbase, but you know you've got the 2+2s as well, and then the fixed heads. You know if you're into a Series 3. V12 automatic. Generally, that is at a discount. You know, the Series 1, 2+2s automatic is at a discount. You can't. You can, but you can't. You know, really, the Series 1s can't accept an automatic gearbox. They're just not long enough, and the gearbox tunnel isn't big enough to accept an automatic gearbox. So you actually can't get it in a full Series 1 spec. But Series 1, 2+2s, you know, those kind of cars, do trade at a discount certainly.
And if someone buys a, like you sort of might do with a 911, you get like a long hood car. Do people buy like a longer one or a 2+2 and then in a restoration make it not a 2+2? Does that happen in the E-Type world?
Yes, that has happened. We don't do it. The reason being is, like, for us to do it, I mean, it would be a fortune. It would be stupid money because essentially you'd be replacing, you know, large parts of the body, and you're into kind of things that aren't really remade, like roofs and things. So actually what you would end up taking is you'd be taking this on a long wheelbase and then you'd almost be trying to find another shell and buy this other shell and then go, okay, now this is it. And so, but I have heard of it done. You know, we've heard of, you know, Series 3 fixed heads, which are 2+2 bodies becoming Series 3 roadsters. And, you know, you've kind of got cars that start off as fixed heads become roadsters and start off as 2+2s and become roadsters and short wheelbase cars. And I don't understand. Like I haven't worked out the logical steps into how that happens. It's kind of, it feels like a load more work and a load more cost
for not a lot more price difference in actual car.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's a market for everything. So it seems like a shame as well to, you know, take out a 2+2, which, you know, some people, very wealthy chap that we know, you know, he has a Series 3 2+2 because his thing is like he's got kids and a wife, and he's not that keen on getting rid of them. You know, he doesn't want to flog them off. He wants to take them with him. So kind of the way that he can do that is go, okay, right, I've got a 2+2. I can still drive a classic car. I still enjoy my classic car, and I can take my family with me. Like, great, win-win, you know. And it's like, you know, he loves it. His view is okay, he accepts his Series 1 is more valuable and whatever, and for the purist better, but
if you can't use it,
he can't take his kids with him, and he's fairly attached to his kids. So it's kind of fair enough. So it just seems a shame if it's kind of a one size fits all for cars, and everyone works to try and funnel down into this kind of perfect setup, and like the automatics as well.
Do you see sort of, we're probably in an interesting time for E-Types in terms of their popularity. Like moving forwards and over the last like 5 years, presumably the super special, you know, race cars and the perfect, let's say Series 1 or whatever, those cars just sort of keep going up because they're on paper, you know, someone wants to buy the perfect E-Type, so they buy those cars. Those sort of price just sort of going up. And then the other stuff, I don't know whether, I guess, are we at peak E-Type popularity at the moment? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. In terms of the others, maybe they'll, because there's quite a few, whether they'll start to sort of either stay at a price and then just depend on condition. How have you found that has changed over the last
Yeah,
5 years or so.
again, like it's one of these kind of things where you open any kind of magazine, I guess, or a classic car magazine. I assume it's the same in any magazine. You're going to have the kind of the doomsday kind of predictors who are saying
Yeah.
this is the ends.
Yeah.
We've reached it, and that sells magazines. Don't get me wrong. It's
does.
kind of gets people interested, and they pick it up, and then they come in to buy a car, and they're quoting obscure references from 5 years ago of how the end is nigh, and and yeah, you absolutely get that, and at the same time, then you get you have another magazine same month or a month later going, this is it, this is prices are about to boom. And my kind of view on prices is actually I think the market's in one of its healthiest states, certainly since we've been involved in it. I think it went through a lot of headlines. It went through a rapid rise of prices of classic cars shot up, and you had this thing of articles about it being better than gold, and buy a classic car today in 6 months, flog it, and it's like, God, you're going to be it's going to be like Del Boy or selling painting at auction. You're going to be selling it for millions, and it's like that's what people bought into, and so you end up having this influx of people that had no interest in the cars. They were reading these stories about what a great investment category. You had these newspapers, mainstream newspapers publishing, about how great these were as investments. And you had people flooding into the market, just buying anything, kind of going, oh, well,
it's an E-Type, or it's a whatever.
It's an E-Type. I can't go wrong, and you had that, and that pumped the market up. And to a degree, the data that is available to everyone, the only available data really that people have access to is auction data. And that's what people judge the market on. And I bought cars through auctions. I've sold cars through auctions. Auctions are great, but there's an inherent risk. You come and buy a car from us or from any other dealer, you can test drive it traditionally. You can sit in it. You can turn it on. You can roll it around. They probably have a ramp. Most dealers will have a ramp somewhere. You can stick it on the ramp. You have a good look underneath it. And fundamentally is, most people are selling them on the basis of, well, you're buying from a dealer. So, I'm going to be here tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to tear all this down and move, 5 miles away and change my name and all the rest of it. So it's like, and you buy from that. You buy from an auction. They generally don't have a ramp. They don't have the facilities to offer you to test drive it. But they went through a stage of, because it was driven by this inflating price, is people were just buying cars from wherever they can get them from. And very much you had this kind of thing of, well, auction data was setting the thing now, was setting the market. And I think you saw this big rise and everyone started going, well, hang on a second, we've hit it, and we're kind of, are we turning, and is the bubble gonna pop? And I think prices dropped and came back down, and everyone's going, oh, so this is we're going to have another bursting of the bubble. And actually, I think what happened was people got jittery, people got a bit nervous. I think a lot of the investors ran away and went, okay, look, out, cut my losses. Didn't know anything about it, shouldn't have got involved in it, sell the car. And and then I think what's actually happened is the market's leveled, and it's just sat, and it's found its normal rhythm, it's found its normal pace. And actually, in the last couple of years, obviously COVID has had an effect, the dreaded COVID that everyone's spoken about.
I feel like it's helped quite a lot on the car market.
I would tend to agree. I would actually agree with that. I think from our perspective, there's no getting away from it. The cars aren't cheap. And generally you need to have a certain amount of disposable income to afford it, because they're not cheap to buy, and they need more maintenance than your everyday car. And actually what we found is people that are buying those cars are traditionally time poor, and actually COVID gave them time back to a degree. They weren't flying, they weren't having to go and do this and do that, and actually they weren't going on holiday with the family when they had their only time off or whatever it may be. And so actually we ended up in a position where suddenly you had people that had always wanted one but didn't have the time to necessarily research it, to get involved in it, coming in and getting involved in it. And so I think it actually helped the market and helped it kind of, okay, people were coming in and were interested in the cars and could spend the time. And actually we sold to some good customers who have kind of stuck with us and are loving their cars now and delighted that they bought it. But there's no getting away from. Unfortunately, it did have a number of negative impacts as well, which was
yes, of course.
Certainly, from our side, it was okay. But I think it's found its normal rhythm, and I think now it's in a healthier place. Like one of the things a few years ago, or 5, 6, 7 years ago, was actually trying to tell a customer when they saw a car selling at auction for
whatever,
it's silly money, trying to tell them that their car wasn't worth that. We're not playing on the same field. Actually, now what we're saying to customers is, well, actually, your car's probably worth more than you think it is, and actually, auctions aren't able to achieve the same prices that they were, and to a degree, looking at that data isn't a fair representation of what can be achieved within the market, because the market has evolved. And actually, my personal opinion, is that auctions have a place and they do a lot of good, and they're great for the market. But I think the market should be set by a dealer who is offering the reassurances, who is giving the customer the ability to really inspect and look over the car, over something that's a bit more of the moment on the day. Did you get the right people to turn up?
Well, that's it. And with auctions, it is very much like, because buying a car, as soon as they start getting rarer and more niche, like finding the person for that car, you get to a smaller number of people. And then you might find, let's just say there's 5 people that might be buyers for that car. Getting them all on one day to be in a position to go, no, actually this day is the day that I'm going to put the cash down. I've sorted out the other stuff. I've done this, I've done that, I've whatever. On that day, I'm going to buy the car. Is actually really hard. Like, it's much easier to go, there's a car sitting there for sale at the right price, and someone's looking at it going, no, I kind of want to buy that. But I need a couple of weeks. I need to work some stuff out.
Exactly. And I think that's like, it's that we do get people that walk in on the day and go, here's the money, or here's the check, or where's the car machine, get it out, I'm paying it all now. And it's kind of, but most people are buying the cars and going, hey, look, I need to move some things around, I need to sell some things, I need a bit of time to get the money together. And we give people, 14 days. It's we give them 2 weeks to kind of say, okay, can you get everything sorted within 2 weeks? If not, communicate with us, let's talk, and let's see where we can get to. It's something whereby you've got to try and work with the people, as you say, for auctions, to get that perfect. And if someone's looking to finance the car, whatever it may be, is those things can take time, and so they just struggle to coordinate all of those moving parts. And fair enough. I remember the guy in the trade said, from his point of view, he buys a car from auction if it's half the value of what he thinks it's worth.
Okay.
Because he's buying on the basis of he can't drive it, he can't, it's difficult to inspect it. And if he can get it at that price, well, it's all in the price. He can fix all the problems for it. And that's all kind of good to go, so to speak. So that's
like the pure business line. Like, that person is buying it to sell it. So they're like, I need to leave X amount in, and I'll just blanket watch everything and go, that seems cheap, buy it. That seems cheap, buy it. That seems cheap. Buy 5 cars. Maybe one needs some work. 4 are great. Boom, made some money. Happy days.
That's it. Yeah, and we had it. There's a magazine which I won't mention the name of, but there's a guy that writes in it, and he's quite disparaging about the fact that saw this car at auction, dealer's gone and bought it, stuck it up 20% more.
Of course they did.
Or 30% more. And it's like, well,
that's
BCA auctions happened in the modern car world. That's how people get their stock. Like, that's how it works. And if they see a deal where they believe the car is genuinely undervalued, why shouldn't they do that? Why
anyone can do that?
And and they're taking the risk. Like they're taking the risk. They're buying the car, not knowing that it may not have a whole raft of issues that underlie it. Well, this beautifully painted car may have engine may be busted on it or whatever, and you just don't know until you get back.
And like you said, you get a lot of customers and a lot of people that don't want to buy a car from an auction for all of the reasons. So even if they're just not even in the room, they're not in the room when the price goes through and you go, oh, I mean, I would have bought it for that, but there was no one there.
Yeah.
So the dealer's like, well, I'll have it. And then they're like, well, I believe this is worth that. I'll put it up for sale. Who knows? It might sell, it might not sell, but you can't blame someone for buying something and putting a price on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it's almost like that deal should be left to the public to kind of sweep up.
Yeah. We know what you bought. The person who then knows the dealer bought it, and then it's on for sale a week later, having had a minor oil change or whatever. They can go in with that knowledge, and they go, well, I know you paid this for it, so like I'll offer you this, and the dealer might go, yeah. Or they might go, nah, whatever.
Yeah. No, I know it's worth X. That's what I'm willing to sell it for. Yeah. And that's their prerogative. At the end of the day, they bought it, they own it, they can sell it for the price that they see fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a public auction. I don't know. I don't follow enough kind of new car auction, so to speak, but BCA or whatever, the classic car auction market is so well publicized. You want to get hold of it, you can get hold of it in a heartbeat, very, very quickly, and there'll be there are sites and there are places which are listing by chassis number, by detail. So they've been doing it for years, and so they've actually got a really, really strong foundation of cars, and you can always go through and track certain individual cars, how they've sold over the years on a chassis number, and it's like it's so public that when you buy it, it's kind of like, okay, it is there. I said I don't track enough about the modern car auction scene, but it seems like it's a little bit more obscure. It's not as well tracked, it's not as well documented publicly, where it's like you can just go into a website and go, okay, how much did this 3 Series BMW sell for at BCA, and how much does this guy bought it for? And then, okay, perfect. We're in.
Yeah. It is an interesting one. The classic car kind of auction space is in a real we're getting so many more online auctions, which you do. I think more people tune in. They don't necessarily buy, but more people see in the online space if it's marketed well. Because historically, I'm not going to list any, but there was always certain auctions where cars you just knew you were going to get cheap cars, because it was, whether it was towards the end of the season of the cars, and there's always been a couple of massive sales in 3 weeks before, and then for some reason a car that could easily have been in one of the other ones ends up in this sale at the end of the day that no one goes to, and you don't get. You might get one buyer, but you don't get 5, and therefore you don't get the crazy price. And one of my friends is really good at watching, generally buys more modern stuff, but watching auctions to see weird cars that have been thrown in. It's all classic cars, and there's one modern car that's is actually a bit niche and is quite cool, but no one that's going to that auction probably cares about it or has a clue. And then it's yep, I'll put a bid in. Yeah. Oh, that worked out. Great. 2 years later, sells it or whatever. It's an interesting one. With E Type UK, because you are a sort of dealership, you sell cars, and then you also do work. So that's right. Will you sort of take in stock and sell that car as is, or do you have we're E Type UK, we've done a couple of things, or all of our cars will definitely run for a year, or do you have anything like that you sort of do?
Yeah, so again, it's as kind of anything, and I'm sure as you found in the wonderful world of kind of podcasting and YouTube, is people now are very quick to put comments on, to say things, to be disparaging. And
Yeah.
if things go wrong with a product now, it's people's instant reaction is right online. Like,
Yeah.
in some ways, just don't even go back to the people. Just get
Yeah.
online and start saying what's happened. And yeah, so from our point of view, when that comes to selling cars, we have to be extremely, extremely careful. And a margin that we hope to make on cars, which is certainly not 20% or anything near that. It's not even half that. Is that can be eaten up if the engine goes pop, then that's we're in trouble. And so we have to be extremely careful when it comes to selling cars and taking on cars for sale. I think a lot of people, certainly, you hear of people that kind of turn up and they kind of go, oh, so if I drive away and something goes wrong, I'm assuming I'm on my own. Like, well, not really. Unfortunately, I think probably legally that's a tricky position for us to adopt. Outside of the other issues that may have, and so what we do when we come to selling a car is we have about 130-point inspection that we go through on the workshop, and sometimes we're able just to go, okay, car goes up, happy. We'll do about 50 miles in the car. Yeah, no problems. Up it goes. Seller's happy. We're happy, and we move forward to selling the car. Other times it's a question of, okay, we find issues and we go, okay, these are the issues that we found with the car. You will need to get these fixed either through ourselves or through someone else. But they need to be addressed. We can't sell the car like this. And quite often we say to people, look, it's not the car for us. It's not a car which we're in a position to offer for sale, or we can offer a purchase on the car. And that's for a range of factors. Sometimes the cars, whilst they drive up, we do compression tests. We just do very basic testing on them. It's 130 points. It sounds impressive, but it's all the basic stuff. And we're going to go through and we go, well, the engine needs rebuilding. The gearbox is crunching in and out of gears. The diff is very whiny. And then you're kind of going, well, that's a whole drivetrain rebuild. Fundamentally, it's just not a car we can offer. We can't risk it. And as I said, the nightmare scenario for us is someone drives off in it, a brand new customer who's come in, they bought the car, their dreams, they drive off, they get down the road, and then they're on the phone going, oh, I'm just outside of the gate. Could you come pick me up because I've broken down? And you're kind of no,
and everythit's broken.
Nightmare.
Like, oh no.
Yeah, this is going to take some explaining, and a few cups of coffee for them. But it's kind of, it's one of those things where we really want to try and make sure that when we sell a car, it's right. We want to try and offer reassurances, and we want to try and make sure that at the end of the day, from our side, it works better for everyone if the car works and is as they expected it, and they're happy with the car and are able to enjoy it, and then they keep bringing the car back to us, because a one and done scenario on the car sale is a nightmare, as we alluded to earlier. There's only a finite number of cars that exist. There's only X number of cars on the road. For us to work, we want to sell the car, and then when the customer comes back to wanting to get rid of it, we want to then sell the car, and ideally in between we would love to service it. And that's kind of the cycle that we've got to work on. We're unfortunately not making Skittles or M&Ms or anything like that, where it's just like, okay, we can just knock up some more and roll them off the production line, and here they are. It's
but in the perfect world, then if that all goes well, you don't need anywhere near the number of customers. If that was like a perpetual cycle and you just got the same cars back and you service the same cars, then you're like, wow, okay, we could get away with whatever it is, 200 cars or something, just constantly rolling through and back out again.
No, absolutely. And that is kind of, I think, as I said earlier, when we came to buying the business, you do the research, you do the looking around, but there are no silver bullets that exist within the industry. It's not like, oh, if you do this, you're guaranteed, an eternal life of success and riches. It's a case of, everyone's trying to do the same thing, which is, keep customers happy, maintain their customer base, and ultimately provide a good experience for people where they want to keep coming back. And that's the aim of the game. And we're not making brand new cars. Part of the I guess the kind of modern car industry is someone may not like the latest Skoda Fabia, but they might like the facelift one, and so they'll come back. You're dealing a lot more with a product fundamentally, and do people like it or not? Do they like the way it handles? Do they like the way it drives? If they don't, they'll go for something else. If they think it's good, they'll come back. It's unfortunate.
Where the Unleashed? Where did the idea for this come from?
So really, fundamentally. So the Unleashed is essentially, it's a bespoke car that we've kind of built out, and effectively it's a car which combines a number of upgrades but is built all into one car. It's aesthetically changes. It's off a Series 3 E Type base, but it's aesthetically changed and it's mechanically changed to improve it, to modernize it, to bring it into kind of today's world. But what we don't want to do is lose the underpinning and the feeling of, okay, you are in an E-Type, you are still driving an E-Type. And our feeling was the Series 3, and my personal feeling is, the Series 3 is a car which I think is a great classic car, really nice example, good usable car, very comfortable, very easy to use, pretty bulletproof, and by that time, British Leyland were involved with Jaguar, and so some decisions had been made that compromised the overall finish of the car, and compromised the overall usability of the car. And our view was, well, why can't you kind of overcome those problems and make the car a lot more usable and a lot friendlier to drive and a lot more luxurious? And we just felt like the Series 3 was an underutilized starting point for a bespoke build, so to speak. And so that's kind of where that evolved from, and it really has kind of gone into something whereby we've just looked to make it a lot bit more luxurious and a bit more modern in its usability. So it's got things like fuel injection, it's got things like air conditioning, things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a classic car. It's got heated seats, it's got electric windows, it's got things that you just look at a classic car and kind of go, well, actually, you wouldn't expect those things to necessarily come as standard on a classic car. And then in terms of the British Leyland aspect of it, we've got rid of the plastic, we've got rid of the kind of vinyl and made it a lot more, it's more leather based, it's got a lot nicer finish on the materials on the inside. And it's something whereby we've focused on trying to make the car usable, enjoyable, comfortable, but also luxurious.
And the various sort of bits and pieces of it, was this like an evolution of things you've sort of tweaks you've done to cars over time, or did you go, let's start, we want to do this project, let's start and then work out what needs to be done and then move forward? Or was it kind of like, was there a lot of feeder material up to that point?
Oh yeah, a lot of feeder material. It's kind of, it started really from the idea of, well, what if we were to combine all of our upgrades? We had a number of the upgrades, and they were obviously, some people want better brakes, some people want fuel injection, some people want a 5-speed gearbox, some people want aircon, but it was rare anyone came in and said, well, I'll tell you what, I want them all. And I would like you to put them all on a newly restored car. And that kind of came in and all came together at the same time, whereby we could put them all onto one car, and we were able to make a number of aesthetic changes, which allowed us as well to change, just sharpen up the look of it a little bit, where we kind of got rid of things which we thought weren't clean, spoiled the line a little bit, and made the car a bit more comfortable. But then a number of the upgrades as well, we had to bespokely develop, so they weren't there. We hadn't already done them. We hadn't tested them, so to speak, and so we had to kind of go, okay, well, how can we how can we integrate this, or what can we do to overcome this challenge or this problem? And those things, like, we would like it to be a kind of clean cut thing where it's like, okay, everything is done from this moment, and that is the car. But the reality is every customer has slightly different demands. We've just finished an Unleashed car, and the customer is based in the Dominican Republic. He doesn't want a hardtop on it. So as an example, like, all the other cars have had hardtops and soft tops integrated into both of them.
Yeah.
But we've kind of gone, okay, we'll take the hardtop off. We're building one at the moment for a customer, and he wants to kind of change the rear end of it ever so slightly. And so it's like, okay, so we'll change the rear end for him. And it's fundamentally the underpinnings of the car are as they sit now, but we are constantly evolving and changing things which are requiring bespoke development and bespoke work. And everyone has a slightly different take of where they want the car to get to. And I guess to a degree, that's the beauty of the classic car industry a little bit, is it's, you're dealing back in the handcrafted, you're walking into the workshop and you're going, well, I don't quite like that. Can we change this? Against, where you have to choose from a spec list. It's not a spec list, so to speak. There are things that we just can't achieve and we can't do. But at the same time, we are able to accommodate and make amends and adjust the cars as people see fit. But it's something that has evolved from a list of upgrades that we had, but also a number of bespokely developed parts that we've had to manufacture and kind of work in to make work.
Yeah, and you won't let someone just order whatever it is, the vents or something, that from the Unleashed.
No, so it's one of those kind of things, like, from our side, it's always been a bit of a stumbling block because, there are the number of times that we'll have an inquiry about, well, can I buy this? Can I buy the seats? Can I buy the center console? Can I buy the dash ends? Can I buy whatever it may be? Or, can I just buy the fuel injection, or can I buy this, or can you just fit this part of it? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, in theory, yeah, absolutely. In theory you could, but one of the things is we're undoubtedly charging a lot of money. There's no getting away from that. It's not cheap. Restoring cars isn't cheap, and I wouldn't pretend it was. And as part of that is customers are placing a lot of trust in us, and also they're placing a lot of belief that the value of the car exists with the value of us as an entity. Fundamentally, is they're buying an Unleashed from us, and so all the whilst while we exist and whilst we're prospering, is in theory the value of those cars should remain. Certainly, if we were to disappear, then people in 20 years' time be going, so who's E Type UK and what do they do and who ran it? And they'll be looking at this video going, God, look at these two young whippersnappers on here. And it's kind of, so those things exist, and our view was actually to hold that value for the customer. We can't go and say, here's the center console, and allow somebody to effectively recreate it. If somebody recreates it, they recreate it. And we have seen examples whereby cars have come out with with exactly the same things as we've got, and people are remanufacturing bits that we've manufactured to fit onto our cars. And that's fine. If people do that, that's the industry, and there's no greater form of flattery than imitation. But certainly from our point of view, is that's fine if other people do it. But what we can't be seen to be doing is going, oh yeah, we'll support an after-sales market where effectively we'll allow somebody to rebuild it and go, okay. And we've had customers who have come in who have spent a lot of money restoring cars, who want to brand their cars as an Unleashed, but haven't gone for an Unleashed offering.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, we can't. Yeah, no, unfortunately, we can't do that. If they go away and brand it themselves, okay, well, I can't stop them. It's their car.
Quite a few manufacturers love doing that though. Like big manufacturers. Who is it? Ferrari loves this one. Like someone buys a Ferrari and then they change the badge. Like they put a stupid badge on the front or the side, and then there's like lawyers and all sorts of stuff, and they're like, no, you can't do that. You have to put it back. And you're like, yeah, it's their car. They kind of should be able to really do whatever they like.
Yeah,
but
no, exactly. And I think that's there's certainly been cases in the classic car world where people have, I think people have been remaking certain cars, and that's kind of come back to bite them. Which seems a shame that, given certainly in the Jaguar space, the main dealer has not always necessarily supported the historic market in terms of there has been no parts supply, there has been nothing, and it has been down to these people who have spent a lot of time, effort, and money to offer that support.
Yeah.
And to a degree, they're kind of getting penalised a little bit for potentially having done that in the past. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are scrupulous operators within the space, but at the same time, there are just genuine people who were trying to do the right thing, or trying to enjoy their own car.
Exactly. Just making tweaks and whatnot. So with the Unleashed cars, let's just do a little run through the process. Where a car comes in, it gets a full restoration, I guess. But do you do more in that process of stripping it down and whatnot? Do you sort of stiffen it up and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I guess the starting point is, a customer will come to us and will fundamentally inquire about having an Unleashed built. The starting point is, do they have a car or do they not have a car? If they don't have a base car or a donor car for the project, then obviously we can source that. And then that's where we start from. Once the car arrives, we inspect it to make sure that we understand what the car is and what it isn't, depending on if they've sourced it or we've sourced it. And then we go through and effectively start stripping it down. We itemize the strip down. Once that happens, the car gets blasted and it goes into the bodywork. As you say, in the bodywork, there is strengthening that happens through the car, through the lower half of it. There is also a process of modifying the floors and modifying the ride height for the customer, because the seats that we use and that we kind of have manufactured are essentially will sit taller, and so they will sit the driver higher within the car. And so we adjust things to sort that aspect out. Then that will be where, ideally, if they did want any further modifications doing, that would happen in that stage as well. So as I said, like this customer that's coming and wants to slightly alter the rear end of the car, that will happen then. It's a nightmare if it happens once we painted the car, because then we're just so limited on what we can do. But fundamentally, then we go into that, and then it will go into a dry fit stage. So we dry fit any kind of component modifications that have happened. We will also dry fit chrome, glass, engine, gearbox, if they have had some particularly unique setup undertaken on that basis. Otherwise, we're able to do a lot of it through measurements. And then we go into shaping, paint. And in the paint stage, they can choose the color. And the color is fundamentally theirs to choose. We don't restrict it. We won't say, you can only choose from Jaguar colors. So they can basically go for whatever they want, and we will paint it in that color for them. And then it kind of comes through to the workshop, and fundamentally at that point, we will have rebuilt the engine, we would have rebuilt the gearbox or manufactured the gearbox, we would have rebuilt the back end, and all the componentries would have been restored. So every nut, bolt, washer, bush, bit of trim, bit of leather, bit of vinyl, everything is inspected and then everything is restored. So we won't take apart, even if it's behind the dash, which is, covered over by whatever it is, by leather, by vinyl, by whatever it may be, and hidden away, is we won't take that bit and go, it's a bit rusty, doesn't matter, no one's going to see it, and screw that back on. Everything is restored. It's all new nuts, bolts, washers that are fitted, and everything is gone through, and whatever needs replacing gets replaced. So if it's a case of we inspect a suspension part and we're not happy with how it is or how it would restore, then we will replace that part, because fundamentally what we're trying to achieve for someone is a product which, for all intents and purposes, is as good as something will leave the factory today, so to speak. Is what we're not trying to do is provide someone which is with something which looks like it was from 1972 but has been restored today. It's kind of a very different philosophy on the restoration side. And so then we build it, and then once again, trim is completely at their discretion. So we have a kind of set guidelines for trim that we try and work towards. But ultimately, if a customer wants to alter it, they want to alter the color scheme. Obviously, they can choose the colors, but we traditionally go black and then a contrast on the trim. So it'll be black and whatever other trim color they wanted.
Yeah.
So we've done black and cognac, black and tan, and fundamentally we've done grey, black and grey. And so but current customer that we're talking to, he wants to slightly change that and maybe not have black in there at all. And so that's fine. That's not a problem. And then they can choose that. So if a customer came in and said, well, I want a pink car with contrasting yellow, fluorescent yellow trim, we might try and kind of say, well, are you sure? And if they say, yeah, 100%, never been sure of anything else, then pink with fluorescent yellow, it will go. That's their decision, and ultimately it's their car. And so, if they want that and that's what they've always kind of dreamt about, then so be it. Before we deliver it, so once we've kind of rebuilt the car and gone through it, then we do 500 miles, which is part of our we term it the Geneva principle, which is the idea that the E-Types drove for their launch in '61 from Coventry to Geneva, and then the idea is we undertake the same amount of miles as Shakedown. If a car can make it from Coventry to Geneva, then that should be suitable to ensure that a car is good enough to go out the door.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, we then go through the car again, and fundamentally any bits that have deteriorated, obviously if any bits fail or whatever, then we replace them. But we also want to make them feel like they've got a brand new car. We don't want them to get a car and go, well, I've spent a lot of money and it looks like someone's driven it for 500 miles. So we go back through it and replace any bits that have deteriorated, any bolts that have kind of lost their shine or whatever it may be. So they get a kind of fresh car, but they know it's going to work. There's always going to be challenges with any kind of restoration car. Fortunately, with the Unleashed branded cars so far, we haven't had any major issues. Everything's kind of gone, and customers are enjoying them and out and about and not in them, and and appear to be having a good time. So it's at the moment all has gone well.
When you sort of, how does the pricing work? Is it just, I come to you, I want to buy an Unleashed, vaguely, all the usual stuff. Do you go, okay, you got a car, or we get you a car, etc., etc. But then once you've got the car, is it then, this is basically the price, or is it, we think we need, how does that work? Does it just flow a bit over time depending on the amount of restoration needed? Or do you go, no, this is the price? That's it.
Yeah, so pretty much this is the price. Essentially, we know the price. The watch out from our side is we have had a couple of people who have kind of come in wanting an Unleashed, and they've said that they're going to source the car, or they have the car, and then they've sent through kind of pictures of the car that they're looking to buy, and you're a bit like, well, hang on a second, that doesn't look like a car. That looks like a box of bits. And it's like, so in some instances, we're kind of like, well, hang on, so we have said to people, like, the price is the price, but fundamentally, like, the car needs to be together as a car. It doesn't matter if it doesn't drive, it doesn't matter if the engine sees on it, because we're rebuilding that. But you can't bring in kind of two boxes and go, okay, well, it didn't have an engine, it didn't have a gearbox, it didn't have any back end, it didn't have any suspension parts. Oh, and it's in two halves because it's completely rotted through everywhere. It's like, well, fundamentally, we are building a whole new car, and that is really what we do anyway. But it's kind of a case of, well, actually, we're not retaining anything of the car. We're not looking at anything here. And so, that's the price is the price, providing that, we work together with customers. And then, to be honest, everyone that's commissioned one has effectively come in and has been very fair, very reasonable, and has worked with us if they want to source the car themselves, if they want us to source the car, or if they've got the car, they've always kind of worked with us to find a decent example or an example that we can work off. Don't get me wrong, it's not, most of them are not on the road driving usable, good condition cars. They all needed restoring. But yeah, fundamentally is we've had one or two people have said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then they've kind of found a car for, $5,000 or whatever. And tried to work off that base. But like,
it's not going to be a good, a friend of mine was having a build done from someone. It wasn't an E-Type, and he'd found a car and got it sent to them. And then they got the car and they were like, no, unfortunately. And the thing was, the price of the car, the base car that was being done, is really cheap. So they were like, look, seriously, like, we could do this car, but like, we're going to spend so much time making it fine. We can just go and find one that's better for way less. Like, we'll just, I don't know what you want to do with this one, but you just need to buy another. We're just going to go buy another one for like, whatever it was, 15 grand or something. Like, and we'll start with that. And he was like, oh, I've spent loads on this. Like, I had it shipped from this person to this person. But you're like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, the end result, we're going to have to start with a different one.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had it we've had customers ultimately, as you say, we've had very much at the other end of the spectrum where a customer has bought in like a stunning example of a car. Well, I say stunning, for me, like I love patina. Like I quite like feeling like a bit of the history exists within the car, and the trim's kind of a little bit cracked, a little bit worn, but not ripped or teared. But it's just and it's like you kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, it tells a story. Like and you think like that's nice. And they bought it and they kind of go, right, I want to fully restore this, and you're a bit like, it's such a shame because you're never going to get that back. Like, that's maybe that. Well, it could be 60, 70 years of wear there, or it could be, who knows? Maybe they had to do an early retrim on it. But fundamentally, you've got such a nice original car, and they're like, look, I want it restored. If you don't restore it, I'll just take it somewhere else, and I want the car restored. And you're kind of like, fair enough. Like, okay, no problem. But you're a bit like, it's like, ow, it hurts every time that you like take it off, and
I get that.
Fortunately, those are few and further between.
I get it, and like everyone has their own reason and whatever, and probably possibly even depending on your budget and how you look at things. But I think it's always, if you're going to do the full job, there is no point. There's 0 point in having, for example, like a perfectly redone engine that's like had loads of money spent on it, and you're like, and we're literally going to throw that in the bin, or like just start again on that, like chuck it away. Do you ever get people trying to sort of maintain the patina throughout one of these like large projects of restoring, but like, I kind of want to keep that?
Yeah, we've had some people who've done it like extremely well, like really, really well. So it's getting harder and harder because the cars are just, the restoration cars now are coming through in poorer and poorer condition. And so you're kind of going, it's a bit of a shame actually, because we've got a customer at the moment who really wants to do that. But the car's just, the car and everything associated with the car is just like too far gone.
Yeah.
And so we tried restoring the interior, and we tried to kind of recolonize it and make sure it like look nice. But when you put it in this freshly painted shell, you just kind of looked at it and just went, it doesn't, it just didn't, it looked like someone's old poor interior. But when you get like a good car that kind of comes in, and we've had it before whereby people have basically done exterior repaints, and then they've kind of polished engine bays up, and actually they've kept the original paint, and then they've kept like the boot floor paint and those kind of things. And some of those have chalk markings on for the chassis numbers. So you start kind of going, actually, that's that's the original paint, and there's the original chalk marking, and you kind of go, and people are like, wow, like that's super cool, and it looks like, okay, you can tell a slight difference, but fundamentally when you look at it, you kind of go, yeah, that looks original, looks really cool.
Yeah.
And you've had it whereby like trims and things like that, but you're relying on the underlying car not being too far gone, and then when you integrate it, but it's such a difficult process, and where you find to try and integrate the fully restored with the original, it can so easily look like people kind of come in and go, yeah, that's cool, but why didn't you restore the interior? And you're like, oh, because we didn't need it, and you're like, yeah, well, it looks like it does need it, and you're like, kind of see it. Yeah, it's very difficult not to fall between two stools. And then like we've had in the past whereby some of the rocker switches have discolored, and so you replace some of them, but you leave some of them as the originals, and then the new one sticks out like a sore thumb because you're like, it looks so new and it's different. It's made of different material. It's got a different level of shine to it, and all this kind of stuff. And then somebody's like, and then they go, actually replace it, and you're like, it's a shame, but makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. With the Unleashed builds, are they lighter at all?
They are lighter than in terms of weight. Yeah. They are lighter. That's it. I was thinking just to make sure, the trim can be lighter. No, they are lighter in weight, and they're obviously quicker in brake horsepower and pound foot, and they've got more torque than a traditional car. So they are, as an overall package, a quicker car through 0-60 and so on, and they're faster away. We took them to a weight bridge. I can't remember the exact weight of them, but the cars are pushing out about 400 brake horsepower and about 400 foot-pounds of torque, which is on, traditionally we haven't yet put one back on the rolling roads kind of post fully being broken in, post its 500 miles and then being used by the customer. So who knows, it could, as it beds down a bit more and gets a bit more settled, we could see a bit more power from them. But certainly from standard, it's I think they're about 270 brake horsepower from standard. So it's a big step up. Hence the strengthening of the chassis and the strengthening of the body to try and accommodate for that. Lasting once it start twisting or anything like that, which would be a problem, especially on an E-Type where the doors won't shut properly.
So I came down, visited you guys, had a little poke around, and took one of the, I presume it was a customer car, but I don't think it had been delivered. Well, obviously it hadn't been delivered because I got to drive it at your place yet, for a little spin for like 20 minutes or half an hour, what it was. And it was a very nice thing. I don't have, as I said, much experience of E-Type, so it was a bit of a shame because we tried to find another E-Type, and we should have probably planned this better, that like just a standard Series 3 or whatever for me to get a reference point, because I imagine it would have been a significant difference between the two. But driving it to me, it just felt like a really nice classic convertible. Like there was no weird suspension traits or anything. It had loads of power, sounded great. Like it just delivered on all the stuff that I would sort of expect a nice E-Type to deliver. But I imagine it is actually, in reality, quite different to a normal one when you drive them back to back.
Yeah, a Series 3 E-Type is essentially built as a Grand Tourer. So it's longer, wider, and it's a bit more relaxed than a series. Like if you were to drive a Series 1, they are sports cars. They are your kind of they're a bit more revvy. They're a bit more lively. They're a short, narrower car, so they can slide a bit easier. And so the Series 3 is a bit more of a Grand Tourer, and fundamentally what we try and build in is a bit more. We're actually focused a bit more on the sportier side of it. That's really what we're trying to achieve. Is we don't want to lose the Grand Tourer aspect, but because you've got that built into the car already, what we're trying to add effectively is a degree of sport and a degree of power and power delivery. And so one of the kind of key differences is that the fuel injection gives is a lot cleaner power delivery, and you've got a lot more pull, and you can kind of get it right through the rev range. So you can go, you've got like low down torque, it will pull quite nicely, but actually it will pull to quite high up in the rev range as well, which is something that a traditional Series 3 doesn't necessarily do. And as I said, it's a bit lazier, and a little bit more kind of relaxed on the driving style. And some people would say maybe a bit vague on the steering, that kind of feedback, and that's where the difference comes. And fundamentally, that biggest difference does come in the fuel injection, really, because you are going from a carburetor to a fuel injected car. So there is a big difference there, that occurs. And so but the power delivery is so much nicer. It's a lot cleaner on the car, and it pulls a lot nicer. It rides the road a lot better. It's a lot more direct on the steering. And ultimately, we've got a lot more setup options as well for a customer if they want to change how it does ride and how it does drive. And that's nice to kind of get them. As I said, if you were to come in and say, okay, actually, I prefer my cars a bit more direct, I prefer them a bit more whatever, I prefer them a bit softer, then okay, all of that is possible, and we can really get it kind of dialed into how you would want to drive it and how you would want to use it. And that's the nice thing about it is it's a lot more customizable for the customer.
Yeah. And your customers, I mean, I don't necessarily want to give out like who's who and whatever, but like your customer profile, have you found you've generally had maybe people that have been into more modern stuff who want a classic but don't want that, or they've had a bunch of classics, or how does the people that you find you for the Unleashed cars, where do they sort of, is there a general trend or is it big variety?
A big variety. Like firstly, the most obvious variety is locationally. Like we have a lot of customers that aren't UK based for the cars, and that's predominantly where the cars are sold to. And generally, they are classic car people, or they've owned classic cars in the past. But actually, to a degree, what they want to try and do is get a classic car which they can use a lot more, and which they have a lot more confidence in. Increasingly now, and I think I've probably said this 100 times, so probably everyone that has spoken to me for any length of time could skip about the next minute and a half. Maybe a bit less. I'll try and keep the story short. But fundamentally, is buyers today, what we find is buyers today are coming into the market, and they aren't used to driving down the road and the car having a problem, and then opening the bonnet and going, okay, right, let's try and get in there, let's try and fix it. And fundamentally is when they come into the classic car world, that is their concern. And increasingly, those are the people that are arriving in the classic car market now. Is myself, I am in my 30s. I know I need to comment. I'm wearing it well. Just my own kind of big up crew, my own hype man. But it's it fundamentally is I when I was younger don't think I broke down in a car. I don't remember breaking down in a car. It was never something which had occurred to me. I hadn't, I have probably broken down in one car that I use as an everyday car, and that was actually, funnily enough, about 6 months ago, driving on the M25 in my Land Rover, so in my Defender. So that was an experience. But that's the first time I've broken down, and fundamentally, is you're getting people that are coming in now in their 30s, in their 40s, and they're entering the classic car market, and they may have experienced breaking down, but it's very, very rare. And their concern is what they hear is classic car, you're going to break down in it. And so that's their instant concern. And, I remember, I think I might have told you this one again, but I remember when, my dad would tell me that, his parent or his family was from Manchester, but he lived in Southampton, or his parents lived in Southampton, and he grew up in Southampton. And they would kind of head up to Manchester to see the the broad family, and by kind of Oxford services, they were broken down waiting for the RSC or the AA to come out, and it was kind of that was the trip. It was like we'll stop at Winchester, and then we're kind of and by Oxford we'll be broken down. So, and he said that was it. That was the kind of family holiday, going up to see family, or and
it was a massive part of life back then, and it's not something I've experienced. I do see it. If you go to like Goodwood Revival or Members Meet or something, you're often on that bit sort of coming towards Goodwood, and there's just like classic cars, just like left, right, just pulled over, steaming because it's always hot, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's why I don't drive one of those all the time.
That's it, and I think that's the fear that the buyer has, and they look at it and they kind of go, ooh. And with the unleashed cars, is they have that kind of confidence of, right, well, actually, this shouldn't happen because hopefully this is being ironed out. And actually, I think one of the industries in general, I think this is not E-Type specific, I think this is classic car specific, is people generally are a lot more dialed into that, and people are trying to overcome that. Fundamentally, is like, don't get me wrong, there's a lovely thing about, or there's a kind of poetic nostalgia about running points and whatnot, but it's, if you can get electronic ignition and they're not going to close up, and your customer isn't happy getting under the bonnet with feeler gauges trying to respace points between whilst it's roasting hot by the side of the M25 when you've got HGVs rumbling past, is, if they're not bought into that, then there is a solution now, and the solution is pretty good and generally doesn't result in that. So it's kind of, that's what people are trying to avoid, and I think that's what people are concerned about when they come into the market. And so, for me, I think it's that's what really the Unleashed is playing towards and is appealing to, and that's how people are coming into it. And actually, they are younger buyers than what we would have for our traditional restoration side of it towards a standard specification.
Interesting. That is, I'm slightly aware of time, and we're cracking along. So so I thought, well, maybe start just sort of feathering off towards the end. So I normally wrap these up with 5 questions. Let's start all the way. Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
So probably 2 that spring to mind. But so we did our first rally, our first kind of classic rally around Greece. That was pretty memorable, maybe for all the wrong reasons. We didn't realise what it was going to be, and so we turned up in a kind of last minute change of car with no roll cage in, no helmet, no lights, like interior lights. And then basically it ended up being a kind of stage rally which you drive between the stages of around like cliffs, and it ended up raining on a couple of them, and we were there, had a brief wander around the car park and realised that we were the only car that didn't arrive with a roll cage in it.
Race car,
and basically went, oh no, we've made a terrible mistake. But actually it ended up being a fantastic trip where we kind of stuck at the back of every timing section with no idea what we were doing, no idea how to read like, average 30 miles an hour in this and do 50 miles an hour here and whatever. We found our own way around, and we were the only people using iPhones as trip computers, because we had it's a 0.2 of a mile, and then you're going through some pass in Greece, and this the iPhone's lost all signals, so you're 8 miles down the road. That was an adventure, and that would probably be my most memorable driving trip. But we drove to Monaco for the historic Grand Prix in I think 2018, and that was fantastic, and pretty relevant because that's happening this weekend as well. So we did that in an E-Type.
That is an event I've always wanted to go to. Not enough to actually bloody organise to go, but I've always wanted to go, and I was meant to go this year. And
it's funny though when if you do get the chance to go, it's great. It's a great drive as well. We drove down there in an E-Type, but maybe it was just luck, but the number of other classic cars and modern cars that you drive past on the route down there, and everyone's waving and, whatever, kind of, it feels like you're part of a community trip that's all going down there together. So it's something that's well worth doing.
My camera's just died for 1 second because I forgot to plug it in, but I can, through the joys of maybe plugging it back in. We'll keep rolling. We'll keep rolling, and I'll put some power in. It sounds like a good one. And those sorts of trips with when you get another bunch of cars and whatnot, it really adds, I find, a lot of sort of extra value and fun. Next question.
Yes.
If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you get like a £500 banger on the side, so you get two cars, but one's basically,
as long as I don't have to name the £500 banger.
You don't have to.
Okay.
It's so you can have something slightly practical, if rubbish, on the side, and then you can have one car. What would it be?
Yeah. Oh. So yeah, I mean, the car that I drive, and I've it's basically on and off has been the car that I've had for probably over 10 years. So on and off has been a Land Rover Defender. So I'm not particularly tough to please, and I would certainly quite happily take a Land Rover Defender. But I think probably if I was to go, I've always had a bit of an itch for an Audi RS6, which I feel like I quite like the idea of an estate, but yet also having the kind of sports car option. And I've always had that kind of itch that's needed scratching. But the problem I found with those kind of cars is generally I get maybe a bit bored quite quickly of them. I feel like they're kind of they're too. But I think, I would, given that I think I'll go with the RS6. I think I'll go with the Audi RS6. I think that will be. I'll probably get bored of it and then end up wishing that I'd gone for a Defender and then try and find a Defender for £500, which I can only imagine what I would end up with. But I think I'll go for the rest of my life. I'll go with an RS6 and accept that I may become extremely disillusioned and bored with it.
Fair enough. I think that sort of car is super appealing as but it'll do everything kind of well, etc. on paper. I don't want to diverge too much because of time, but I have just bought a car like that.
Really?
I bought an E63.
Okay.
Estate.
Yeah.
Because I wanted the E-Class because it has the biggest boot of all of those cars by quite a long way, and I've got the 63 because I feel like my next family big car is going to be electric, so let's have something a bit stupid. And immediately, day one, it's stupid and pointless, but that is kind of fun. But it is definitely pretty pointless because it has tons of grip, so fast, but also just massive and really heavy. So it doesn't. It's not a sports car because it's a massive estate, but it is equally quite impressive. It's sort of impressive and a slight stupid.
That's it. So my dad looked at the E63. That was a car. So when I was saying when we talk about, because he was looking at cars to buy, and I think he's going to lean towards the electric route. But I was saying I just think something like that, like the E63, or so the RSs, the RS6. You've got the space. Yeah, you've got the practicality, but you've got you've just got performance on tap, and most people, your everyday car person, is going to look at it and go, "Oh, on a estate, I could smoke that," and then "No,
nope, not today."
Yeah, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Right, most undervalued car at the moment. What do you think should be worth more?
I mean, I think for me, I've got to stick to kind of what I really know the values of, which I think maybe is going to be a bit dull for most, but I've got to say a Series 3 Roadster E Type. For me, from my perspective, I've been saying for a long time, I feel like that they are undervalued. I feel like that they could almost be, stylistically, they're very close to the lineage of the Series 1 and Series 2 E Types, but they're far enough away that they could almost be defined as their own kind of car. They could almost be defined as something that's not an E Type, but has its lineage within. And I just feel like there's so much you can do with them. They are great cars, and I know the value of them extremely well, given that that's a space that kind of every day
Yeah.
I'm looking at. So I just feel like that they are just underrated, but they sit in the shadow of the Series One,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a car which I think for people could be great.
What can you get a Series 3 for? No, like a
But I think
reasonable car for.
I think you could pick up a reasonable Series 3 Roadster for, probably 70, 80,000 pounds. And if you're prepared to do some work and accept some kind of nuances of it, and as I said earlier, like you could get a pretty decent one for £100,000, and then you can get an exceptional one for 140, 150. But I think from my side, like you could pick up an everyday usable one easily enough, and you can just do so much with them. And I think that they're great cars and slightly undervalued. And for me, I quite like the look of them. They're a bit of a Marmite car. Some people love them, some people hate them, but for me, I look at them and I kind of go, oh, it's nice that they're a bit wider, a bit longer. They are a 70s car, and I quite like it. So for me, I would stick to that.
And a bit more tech and whatnot. What do you think?
Yes.
What is the most interesting car to you at the moment? What are you looking up, Googling?
Okay, maybe I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in here. So the most interesting car for me, and again, this is probably something which people who have known me have been bleating on about now for at least a few months, but is the electric side of things.
Yeah.
I know it's not a car, and this is why I said it's a bit of a curveball, but I'm doing a course at the moment, and part of the course is I'm looking into the kind of future of automotive and the future of driving and what they could look like, and trying to reapply it back to the classic car market. But I think the electric thing is interesting, and to be honest, I spend most of my time looking at things around electric and hydrogen and biofuels and these kind of options. So if I was going for a specific car,
I think it's a very interesting space. I think a lot of people in our sort of industry are very quick to get to expletives on electric cars for all reasons and various things, and there's a lot of valid flack leveled at them, but I think there's also just like for me, I look at them and they go, they're a thing that exists, and they might work for some people, they might not work for other people, but it's we're being pushed into that way for general transport anyway, and I love tech. Like I really do like tech, so there's a lot of stuff about electric cars that I quite enjoy, and it's interesting. I find having some manufacturers come in, and it's the first time in a long time that we've had completely new, and Tesla have now been around for a while, so they're not new, and just look at, let's say, automotive in a completely, there's the ability for them to just reimagine car layouts, everything, just the way we do stuff in cars that haven't been from these companies that have been around for 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever, that amount of time. And I think that in itself is really interesting. And I'm just intrigued as to like how it's going to go. And they're kind of there's a lot of elements of electric cars that I quite like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super I find it really interesting. I think, as you say, like I understand that they're not for everyone, and I think for true petrol heads, it feels like sacrilege, and it's kind of and for classic car people like myself, it's maybe it's a worrying proposition, in terms of, well, what does that mean for classic cars, and what does the future hold for the industry? But actually, I've spent 2 or 3, maybe 4 months looking and reading around, and I think it's just interesting because it's such a seismic shift for the industry as a whole, and it's one of those things whereby actually people aren't sure that battery is genuinely the future. It's something that sits here today, and it's proved the concept. And as you say, like Tesla, what Tesla really did for that is this long held belief that customers didn't want anything other than petrol or diesel.
Yeah.
That was the view. And actually, they proved to the world that people do want something else. There is something else that exists. And to a degree, people's consciousness has helped that. But, I think the question is can the world's infrastructure support a world whereby everyone is driving an electric car?
Who knows? It's definitely a big issue.
Yeah.
And a whole nother many podcasts.
That's it.
But the one bit that I've sort of started to realize recently is the amount of power required. So like if anyone's ever charged an electric car or has an idea of the amount of power in a battery pack, like 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, like look at your electricity bill. Just have a look at your electricity bill and see how much it costs to run your house, and see for how long you could run your house for 100 kilowatt hours. And the answer is a long time. Like the amount of power you are putting into a car, and people want to do it in 10 minutes. There's a reason the cables are like freaking huge. Like
massive.
And the infrastructure required to deliver. I heard someone talking about building a car storage facility, and they were putting in some charging points, and they were saying like, I can't remember the specifics, but it was basically like to put in a 50 kilowatt charger was going to be significantly more power than the rest of their building required. And then if you wanted to put in like a few, it's basically impossible. Like the cables to that part of wherever just did not exist to handle that volume and amount of electricity in one go. And that is something that is like, that is a real issue. Yes, we need to be cleaner and et cetera, but everyone's suddenly shifting to electric cars. All that energy has got to move around a lot. It's kind of crazy. And then also if you've ever like touched two battery points together or dropped something in between 2 points, you go, we're dealing with a lot more electricity than any of those situations.
That's it. And I think it's, as you say, I completely agree. And that's what, I think it's one of those things which I'm quite fascinated by. And I love the technology. And that's part of the thing about, what we do when we're doing an Unleashed car is, we are integrating technology into those cars. And that's, I guess, partly driven by the fact that that's what I'm interested in. That's what I believe in. And so, but it's, just looking at the cars that are coming out, looking at how they're approaching it, looking at the philosophy of, what people are doing. And I think even in small things like, Formula One against Formula E and things like that is, just these little snippets of, okay, well, where are people going and what are people trying to do and what are people bought into? I think it's interesting. You've got more major manufacturers pulling away from Formula E and actually they're stepping into Formula One, which are not looking to go. They're looking to go green and sustainable fuel, but they're not looking to go battery, full electric. And it's interesting that manufacturers are bought into that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to sort of follow what's happened, because a bunch of manufacturers went into Formula E. I think then probably did it for a couple of years or whatever, and then went like, well, we're not getting any more out of it. Like we've been into it. We're not developing our own technology. It's all like quite unified across the various cars and teams and whatever. There's not much we can do. So a lot are leaving, but then some are going back. Like I can't remember who's going back in, but a couple of big manufacturers are going in.
Yeah.
And I think Formula One, I'm loving that Porsche and Audi are going to come in and all of that. But I think that is more, it's a marketing thing. It's Formula One has a lot of eyeballs on it. And especially now with Drive to Survive and all that stuff, we've got the US market is much more interested in Formula One.
Yeah.
So selling performance stuff and representing your brand, it makes sense to be in Formula One.
Yes.
But I think they said, I can't remember who it was, basically said the only sort of motorsport it's worth being in at the moment is Formula One. All the others get no views. they get like you're just wasting money pretty much. Like Formula One, it works. Like Mercedes make money. That team makes money and also does all the marketing. None of the other ones. No one watches. Like people do, but you're pretty niche if you start and watch any of the other stuff.
That's it. I was talking the other day to a guy, and he was like, "Oh, I completely understand why, people like manufacturers are basically throwing away like Le Mans legacy or endurance racing legacy, given that, fundamentally the people that I think you were saying that the research that was done on Formula One or on endurance racing is actually it's a niche, real enthusiast kind of club follower who will follow that kind of racing." And fundamentally, it's the participants that are most likely to be invested in the brands than it is the people watching it.
Yeah.
And for manufacturers, they're kind of going, well, and as you say, who's watching this? Who can we sell to off the back of this? And who's going to resonate with that message? Like, who's going to resonate with we won Le Mans?
Yeah.
And they're increasingly going, well, it's a tricky one. And as you say, they go into Formula One and Miami Grand Prix and what is it? Vegas.
All the celebs.
That's it. Martin Brundle's grid walks, which
exactly.
in itself should be a comedy show.
Always interesting. Yeah, I think that's totally true. Because if you look at, like, I love WEC and all of those events such as Le Mans, etc. But most of the racing is people paying to race. It's very wealthy people paying, and the cars have sponsors on it, and it's generally the companies of the people that are racing or their mates or whatever. Now there is some that's not quite like that, but there is a lot of that. And then it's only when you get up to the manufacturer level, of which there are very few cars actually racing that are pure manufacturer jobs, and they only do it for, like, apart from someone like Toyota, who's just like, we love it, and they just keep going. But everyone else comes in for like Ford or something. They come in because it's the whatever anniversary. They want to drop a new car. They want to win.
Yeah.
So they game the entire season so that they can then win that one race. They like drive at 80%, and then suddenly in the race they're like 7 seconds faster than everyone else. So that they can get all the marketing splash, and then they leave because
that's it. Job done.
Everyone loves a comeback. No one cares about the team that's just there winning coming second for 10 years in a row. It's like, but who's coming back? Who's the new team? That's the one that people care about.
That's it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right, final question.
Yes.
5-car garage, unlimited value.
Oh, well, obviously I could fill it with just E Type, so I'll remove those for the minute.
5 unleashed.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, 5 unleashed, 1 in pink, or I go 5 unleashed, 4 unleashed, and 1 Series 3 and 1 Series 3, 1 Series 1. But anyway, I'll remove all of those, and I'll go for cars that aren't related. Well, the first one that springs to mind is a D Type. Jaguar E Type, so I would definitely go for one of those. Love the shape of them, love the look of them, love the story behind them. Le Mans, and love everything that goes with that. Think that they are just beautiful looking cars, and they look like they're going quick when they're standing still. That for me is, if I only had one, I would just have that, and the rest of them will go. I think second, so when I was younger, I said about like the toy cars that I had. Yeah. And I had an F50 and an MC12.
Nice.
And I think I would go with an MC12 as my kind of as my one. It's a bit more different. It's not as it's kind of people wouldn't necessarily instantly kind of go, oh, it's a Ferrari or it's this or it's. Or they won't go, it's an F40 when it's an F50 and not knowing the difference between the two. And so, I think I would have to go an MC12 as that I had in the white and all the rest of it. And it was, that one actually, as I recall, it had a screw that went through the plinth up into the car.
Yeah,
Whereas the F50 didn't have one, so it would just rattle around in the box. Probably because I lost it. Yeah. But that one, that would have to be the second one. So actually, it's funny because it's got me thinking. There's a customer of ours, and he always had he had a Lancia Integrale, and that
Yeah.
was a car which I always wanted.
Yeah.
And then my view was like, once I've got the money, or the space, or the money and the space, I would love to have a Lancia Integrale as a car.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Super duper cool. Like, yeah, super
Like they're a
duper
bit
cool. I would have to
rubbish,
go.
and I've heard lots of people say, yeah, but 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I worked on them and they're awful. But I drove
Yeah.
one the other day and it was cool, and I think they look cool, and that is good enough for me. And the interior is kind of fun.
That's
so
it.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw the guy who has one. He was a Japanese import, but it had like blue with kind of beige interior, and
Yeah.
it just like I would have bought that car like there and then.
Yeah.
I was like, perfect. I want that car. Like it's that would have to be it. And I think I kind of one thing that's always like, I don't know, that I've always been super impressed by is pre-war cars. And people's ability to drive kind of pre-war cars, double declutching, and making it just look simple and not making a complete fool out of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think I would have to go for a chain-driven Fraser Nash.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just because I would want people to look at me how I look at other people.
Yeah.
And like I go to Goodwood and I watch these people like throwing these chain-driven Fraser Nashes around, and I'm literally like, right. I mean, if I was in that car, I think I'd be the first person to do a 10-minute lap around Goodwood or something. It would be like I go so slowly. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I just look at them and I'm like, I can feel myself becoming, it's like it's the best horror movie that I would ever need to watch. I just look at them and I'm like, I'm scared. And a friend of mine has got a Lee Francis and he drives that, and I'm like, I got in that and made a complete fool out of myself, and he was like, yeah, come on, get out. Like,
I had a go in my first pre-war car a couple of months ago, maybe more than that, and for my sins, I can't remember what it was, but it had a prop, like, the gearbox where it just suddenly just says no. Like if you're not doing everything correct, it's just like dunk, no, and you're like, oh, it's going great, and then just you're like, that's it. I've just got to go back down to neutral, start again. So
that's exactly it. It was basically we went on a trip in the US, and I got quite friendly with this guy who had a 3-litre Bentley.
Yeah.
And he let me have a go at it. And we were in an E Type and he was in his 3-litre Bentley, and basically we were in the bombing lot, and he stuck with us.
Yeah.
The whole trip, like literally glued to us, like.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, they can't be that difficult to drive. And he had him and his wife, and he was throwing her around these roads in the US all over the place, and she was absorbing all of it and actually loving it. Like she absolutely loved it. And he's like, come on, have a go. And I got in it, and I got about halfway around the block, and he was like, yeah, I missed the gear. And he's like, yeah, you got to pull over. He's like, okay, pull over first, start again. Got halfway around the block, missed the gear. He's like, right, you got to pull over, start again. And so she went again, a bit further down the road, and he was like, yeah, probably best we don't do this on a public road, and he took over. And I was like, okay, second time that I've been humiliated in front of people. But I would think like that in my mind is like, I just feel like it's like the purest form of driving you can reach. Like you have got to be completely in sync with the car. You've got to get everything right. You've got to be on top of your game. If you're not, then it can go wrong, and there is no safety, there is no nothing, and it's like you're in trouble. And that kind of like life risking and life affirming affirmation whenever you go out, and it is like, I don't know, it must feel kind of rewarding when you get it right.
I think so. And like the more you have to do, the more rewarding it is. And driving something like that, you're like, if I get around the block, I'm having a great day. Like that in itself is like so much easier than getting in your RS6 and just blasting to, like, I don't know, northern Sweden in any day of the week, any time of year.
Any weather, whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. I had a moment in the car I was driving. We were going down a hill, and it got to a narrow point, so where the cars parked inside a road were a bit narrow, so you couldn't get two cars. And I'm going down the hill, and a car just decides to pull out and come up the hill towards me, of which I was like, okay, I've got to stop. It was rear-only brakes, so you touch the brakes like a bit, and the back starts to like go sideways, and you're not even really slowing down that much, and you're like, oh no, I'm gonna have to pull the handbrake as well. And then the car in front just like stops, and you're like, no, I'm not reversing up a hill out the way. I can't stop. Like, you need to give me a lot more space. It was sketchy, but like it was okay. But a learning experience.
You almost need
like
learner plates.
Yeah, and like I can't stop quickly. I can't. It's physically impossible to stop quickly. Like, but
that's it. Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot in that. So how many cars have we had? Have we got one more? I think you had your D Type.
How many have I had?
You had the Delta,
the MC12.
MC12.
Yes.
You had a Fraser Nash, and you got one more.
Okay, so I've got to go for one more.
Have you got a daily?
So, so I was actually going to say, I think. Okay, yes, you're probably right. I don't have a daily. I don't think I could daily any of those anyway.
You could daily the Lancia, because I think the car you're talking about is the one I drove, and he drives it all the time. It's not super modern though.
Yes. No, potentially. I think it probably is, I would think. I could go for a daily. Unfortunately, it would be boring, and it would just be a Land Rover Defender. So I'm not going to go for that.
Or old one?
No, old one.
Okay.
Old one, Land Rover Defender 90. No, I think I'm going to go for, instead, I'm going to daily the Lancia.
Yeah.
I won't make it to my 40th if I daily that. And then I need to go, because I've kind of taken, I've taken up a bit of historic racing. But I've been trying to historic race for a few years. Terribly, I might add. And always guaranteed to be propping up the rear of any grid that is willing to accept me.
Someone's got to do it.
That's it. Someone's got to be at the back waving to the fans that aren't there to see us, or to see me, certainly. Yeah. But I think I would go for, I've had a bit of a hankering for a single seater, and I bought a Formula Ford and then got scared out of it. But I think I would go for a Formula Junior, a kind of Lotus style Formula Junior.
Yeah.
Not that I can add a lot more, because I don't know a lot about them. But I think having like a Formula Junior Lotus car would be super cool. But I need to kind of G myself up and big myself up before I get anywhere near it.
So that, okay, and that probably, I presume, would be the gateway to more single-seater stuff in the future, but you're not going, 90s Formula One car.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
No, 90s.
Steps, you've got to do the steps.
Baby steps, exactly. It's something I kind of want to do. I do, saloon car racing, kind of, so to speak, currently, classic stuff. But I just think, again, like the Fraser Nash, and I guess I could view the D Type and kind of go, well, the D Type could be your kind of race car.
Could be.
But I feel like if you're single seater racing, I couldn't do pre-war racing. I just don't. There's just no way I could pretend that I can even muster up the courage to do that. But single seater racing, no seatbelt, no safety equipment, on the edge, no, not for me. Massive respect to anyone that does it.
Yeah.
But certainly. I think I would have to go, single seater. I feel like, again, is kind of, from a racing point of view, it feels like you're really at the purest form, and you are, it's you and the car, and you have to be in tune and in sync with the car. And whilst that exists within like your saloon cars, I mean, I race a Mini and a Cortina and things like that, but it's like those, if you're not in sync, well, okay, you've got the massive roll cage and
Yeah.
you're in a very relatively structurally sound car. And so you're kind of okay, and it shouldn't be too much drama. So, single seater is, again, it feels like it's
a bit more pressure. And yeah, it is the purest. That is like the purest form, unless you're on a motorbike. And I think that's probably more pure. But like in car form, a single seater, there's no extra anything. There's not an extra seat. There's no extra metal. It's just you, 4 tires, an engine, brakes, whatever. That's it.
That's it. So I think those have to be my 5. I said I daily the Lancia. I daily the Lancia in the winter, and then I'd probably drive the Fraser Nash as my daily in the summer. And
nice. Yeah.
just for added risk.
Yeah. Keep it on the edge.
That's
right.
it.
Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And hopefully it's all gone well.